my pleasure to call this meeting to order. Welcome to each and every one of you to meeting number 30 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure, and Communities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few points to follow. First off, members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed to the chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk, as well as myself, will do the very best we can to maintain the order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. Members, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on October 29, 2020, the committee will now continue its study of targeted infrastructure investments. It's my pleasure today to welcome and introduce all of you to our witnesses. First off, between 6:30 and 7:30, we will be hearing from the Honorable Miriam Monsef, Minister of Rural Economic Development, as well from the Department of Industry, Eric Dagenet, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Spectrum and Telecommunications Sector, and from the Office of Infrastructure of Canada. I'm going to call her a new member of the committee because she's been out so much, Ms. Kelly Gillis, Deputy Minister, Infrastructure and Communities. Welcome, Kelly, once again. And Alison O'Leary, Assistant Deputy Minister, Program Operations and Communities and Rural Economic Development. From 7:30 to 8:30, we will welcome the Honourable Francis Lankin, Senator, as well from Canada's Building Trades Unions, Mr. Sean Strickland, Executive Director, and from the Insurance Bureau of Canada, we will be hearing from Craig Stewart, the Vice President, Federal Affairs. So with that, to all of you, welcome. And I'll be moving to the Honorable Miriam Monsef for her opening remarks. And Miriam, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. Hello, colleagues. Bonjour, Anine.
Good afternoon, everyone.
On Mississauga and Anishinaabe territory, in my basement in Peterborough, Kawartha. Grateful for the study you're doing and the opportunity to speak with you today about infrastructure accessibility and its contribution to the overall success of our communities. I know this year has been a really difficult one for everybody on my screen and for your families and your teams. And I know that it has been incredibly difficult for Canadians. The pandemic has disproportionately affected women and those who are already vulnerable, like low-wage workers, young people, racialized Canadians. Like my parliamentary secretary, Goody Hutchings, I want to salute everybody on the front lines of the fight against COVID, particularly our friends and colleagues from Newfoundland and Labrador who are coming into Ontario to help us with this difficult and virulent third wave. The pandemic has reminded us how vital our connections are. La pandémie nous a rappelé.
The pandemic reminds us how important our connections are.
Broadband, roads, waterways, and community centers, they connect us. And we're stronger when we're connected to the people and the services that matter to us. COVID has magnified gaps in services and in infrastructure available in specific populations, including in rural communities. Our government has been working to address infrastructure gaps in every community in this country since we formed government. And our infrastructure plan is working. 5 years in, we are 40% of the way through this 12-year plan, and we have delivered over 40% of the funding available. The Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program includes over $180 billion in investments. 3,400 projects have been approved so far, including more than 2,000 projects just this past fiscal year during the pandemic. And let me thank my officials and my team who, like you, are working from home, and their service delivery standards have not missed a beat. Within 20 to 60 business days, we move these important projects forward for communities, and I'm so grateful to get to work with them. 3,400 projects approved so far, with more than 2,000 in this past fiscal year, with over 1,000 projects in this committee's 13 ridings. In rural communities, more than $3.2 billion has been invested under the Rural and Northern Stream, which is specifically dedicated to supporting rural communities and making investments in broadband, water, roads, community centers across the country. And I want to thank the Liberal Rural Caucus for advocating for this separate stream and for bringing back the Rural Economic Development Secretariat through their advocacy. C'est un grand pas en avant pour les
This is a big step forward for Canadians living in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities.
These investments create jobs, more than 100,000 jobs each year, and improve our quality of life. The result, more Canadians have access to high-speed internet, more have access to clean air and clean water. Our communities are safer and more resilient and more inclusive. Ces investissements sont
These investments are made in rural communities.
Strategic investments that create growth, fight climate change, and build inclusive communities. And they're more important now than ever. You saw the federal gas tax fund, which we intend to rename, by the way, the Canada Community Building Fund, is making a difference in communities across the country. And to help ease the crunch of the pandemic, as per a request from municipal leaders, in 2020, we delivered the whole year's $2.2 billion in gas tax fund to municipalities, and more needs to be done. Budget 2021 includes our plan to conquer COVID, get Canadians back to work, and build back better. That includes broadband as well as social infrastructure like housing and childcare and supports for sectors hit hardest by COVID, such as tourism. There's a $6.2 billion investment already in place for broadband, and Budget 2021 added an additional $1 billion to this important fund. There's investments to go ahead with a national infrastructure survey. And of course, we're proposing to double last year's gas tax fund payment, just as we did in June 2020. And to provide the full 21-22 amount in one payment instead of the usual 2 installments. Mr. Chair, I see your hand is up. Is that a signal that my time is up?
That's the 1 minute mark. When I throw the hand up, it's 1 minute mark. You got about 20 seconds.
Perfect. We are committed to completing the remaining 60% of the infrastructure program and adapt to the evolving needs as we have through the COVID-19 resilience stream that is providing improved ventilation in public buildings to reduce the risk of aerosol transmission of COVID. We'll work with this group. We look forward to your study. And of course, we will work together to build a more inclusive, more fair society for all. Merci.
Thank you, Minister Monsef. Well done. We're now going to move on to our first round of questions. We have first up with the Conservatives, Ms. Cusi. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you so much, Minister, for taking the time to be here with us again. Today, I'm sure it's a very busy time for you, given that we just had the federal budget, and of course, there are just so many files that touch upon the rural economic development file. You know, I was very fortunate to sit on the House Procedures Committee with your predecessor, Bernadette, who of course went on to the cabinet in the capacity of fisheries and oceans. So, you know, certainly quite a legacy there indeed to follow. So I appreciate you taking the time to come here today and to answer the questions of the committee. Certainly, we are several meetings into this study now after having completed previous studies. One which I believe touches upon this study, the Canada Infrastructure Bank study. And I guess my first question is just a result of sort of some of the struggles and disappointments that we see in having undertaken that study in addition to this study. And there have been interesting, certainly very interesting witnesses, but some of the patterns that we've seen in discussion of infrastructure projects, for example, are re-announcing the same funding over the past number of years because it just takes so long to get any tangible action on an issue, for example. So we've had conversations about that, and I'd be interested um, uh, to hear your thoughts on that. We get concerned that a lot of the announcements in the budget are just a result of the pending election, that they're not a sincere effort to address the concerns of communities. And as well, we've heard in our testimony a lot of problems with the coordination of other levels of government. I, in my position of shadow minister for transport, certainly have seen this, for example, in a conversation I've had with the Ontario Minister of Transport, Minister Mulroney, where she just indicated some problems with some federal commitments being carried through after provincial commitments had been made, resulting in some holdups for infrastructure. And so, we just think that it's very important to sort of walk the talk when it comes to putting your money where your mouth is as well. We had concerns about private sector investments in Canadian projects. For example, your government, of course, was forced to purchase the Trans Mountain Pipeline project when it was very difficult, if not impossible, to secure private funding. We saw this again with Energy East, and of course, with the cancellation of the Kitmat pipeline project just a month ago. I also feel that the tech project, which never came to fruition, was a result of the intended off-putting of your government in an effort to not result in a viable project. We've also seen with this, with the A to A railway. I certainly hope that this won't be the case. Being a member of parliament from Alberta, I do look forward to this as a potential um, throughway for our natural resources, since they have been stymied in so many other regards, and that's very concerning for me. Another piece related to your file is the Sustainable Internal Trade Plan for Canada. I think we've seen a lot of interprovincial trade barriers, which I think we as the official opposition would really look forward to see be broken down in an effort to really allow the economy to evolve internally and domestically in sort of one piece to hope to restore investor confidence in Canada, which has been broken, I believe, as a result of the examples that I gave previously. But I certainly imagine that this must be just a lot for you to manage and oversee, given the breadth of your file, and especially given your role as Minister for Gender Equality and Women, especially given that your government is so interested in protecting the chief of staff rather than the women and the men of the Canadian Armed Forces. And, certainly I know in your role, you will advocate for the Prime Minister's chief of staff to come forward to the Defense Committee and testify, because I know your government certainly claims to stand up for women, and I saw you in action at Women Deliver and how strong you were there, but they must also take accountability for their failure to act on sexual misconduct allegations against General Vance 3 years ago. So, with all of that, Minister, I would just ask and hope that your government will finally step forward and take action on these things that I have brought forward to you today. And I look forward to you addressing that. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Minister Monsef, unfortunately, the time is up.
Okay.
And Ms. Kusi, thank you for the statement.
Thank you.
We're now going to move on to our first set of questions. So we're going to move on to the Liberals. Hopefully, they can give you some time to respond to some of Ms. Kusi's statement. We have first off Mr. Alkuri, and he's going to be splitting his time with Mr. Iacono. Mr. Alkuri, you can start off. You both have the floor for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to our witness. I'm very pleased, particularly to see the Honourable Minister Monsef here with us tonight so that we can have an exchange of ideas and we can ask questions and hear answers from her. I want to tell Ms. Monsef that we appreciate her interest in our work and the credibility that it clearly has. We have worked hard. My question for the minister is the following. We have heard recommendations to the effect that Canada would benefit from a streamlined strategy to reduce the digital gap and to provide affordable broadband that would cover Canada. Can you talk a little bit about our government's approach and why there are so many different programs? Thank you, Minister.
Sure.
Merci.
Thank you for your question and for your hard work.
Appreciate the advocacy you've done for your community since you got elected. I asked my officials, my team to look it up, and there are over 70 infrastructure projects in your riding that you have made happen. They're creating jobs and they're improving the quality of life for your community. Thank you for that work and for the warm welcome. Certainly, COVID has exacerbated existing gaps in our country, particularly the digital divide. And since we formed government back in 2015, we were able to put forward investments to connect 1.7 million Canadians. And we started adding more to that in our new mandate with the Universal Broadband Fund. It's recently been topped up with another $1 billion through Budget 2021. And the Broadband Fund has a separate stream for Indigenous cell gap projects, another stream that is rapid response. So shovels go in the ground this construction season and they end sometime at the end of this year, as close to at the end of this year as possible. And another pot of funds for core projects that take longer than a year. The goal is to connect every single Canadian to this essential service. And yes, there are different funds with CRTC. The Connect to Innovate program existed before the Universal Broadband Fund. Indigenous Services Canada, as well as the Regional Economic Development folks, also help with that process. The good news is there's a lot of funding available, more than ever in Canada's history, to connect everybody to high-speed internet. And yes, there are many cooks in this kitchen, but we need these cooks in the kitchen because each of them has a different piece of this program. That said, we heard the importance of coordinating through the Universal Broadband Fund. My department has stepped up to be the lead coordinator amongst all these cooks to make sure that the process is smoother for applicants and the results are better for Canadians. And to address MP Kusi's question, yes, this is all a lot of work. And thankfully, we have great teams who work with us. But you know who else works really hard? the moms out there who right now don't have access to high-speed internet and are trying to figure out how to look after their kids and how to do their work and how to stay safe in this very difficult time. Who else works hard? Farmers who, like my colleague earlier mentioned, are afraid of droughts and other challenges that come their way in addition to COVID. Canadians work hard, and it is an honor to work hard on their behalf.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Iacono?
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the Minister with the 2021 budget that has been proposed by our government, the Universal Broadband Fund that consists of $6.2 billion plus $1 billion is quite a contrast to the previous government, which limited its spending and spent only $6 billion of the $9 billion it had earmarked for this sort of thing. And our government, in contrast, is spending money on all sorts of infrastructure projects. In fact, $1 billion over 6 years, in addition to what was already earmarked, is going to be available for broadband projects. So, Minister, could you assure us that the projects that will be approved will be go beyond just major telecommunications businesses?
Yes, thank you so much. And particularly thanks, Angela, for your advocacy on behalf of seniors with Seniors Caucus. That work has been invaluable. The previous government focused on short-term investments. We're focusing on long-term infrastructure investments, such as our 12-year, $180+ billion program. We're also mindful that access to high-speed internet is about health and safety, and it's about economic development. And we're spending because it's a smart investment in our communities, and we can't afford to leave rural and smaller communities behind. In the Connect to Innovate program, we saw a third of our federal investments go to larger ISPs, a third to smaller ISPs, and another third to Indigenous internet service providers or partners. And we will continue to ensure that there's a diversity of partners in our projects to meet the diverse needs across the country. I wonder if Eric, anything you'd like to add to this? Eric Degenais and his team hustle hard behind the scenes.
Mr. Dejanay?
No, thank you, Minister. Mr. Chair, I think the Minister has covered it. I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Iacono, you got about 25 seconds.
Madame la
Minister, I would like to raise the government's goal to connect 98% of Canadians by 2026 and 100% by 2030. Why will it take the extra 4 years to connect the extra 2%?
Is that a thank you I can answer, or thank
No,
you?
go ahead. No, go ahead. Thank you, Minister.
The goal is to connect as many households as quickly as possible, and funds are available, and we're approving projects as quickly as we can. This is a big, beautiful country, and there are some places across the country that are harder to connect than others. They may require low Earth orbit satellites, for example, or just take longer to connect. That's what we're accounting for in those timelines, but the goal is to connect as many households to this essential service as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you, Mr. Iacono, as well as Mr. Alcuri. We're now going to move on to the block. We have Mr. Barso Deval. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the Minister for being with us this evening. I think this is the second time, at least, that we have had the Minister on a similar study. So perhaps you could explain to us a little bit concretely how your department is structured and what your responsibilities are exactly. But my questions are on the gas tax and on municipalities, and I know you have heard this question from me before, and I've asked this of the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, and that is your related to your work. So I would like to hear from you about the gas tax fund. Because the money hasn't been forthcoming quickly, many municipalities have had a hard time in more rural areas. Now, for large municipalities, they seem to have been able to take advantage of it. Obviously, large cities have so many projects that it becomes more possible, but in smaller municipalities, it is hard sometimes to actually tailor their projects to the gas tax fund. Sometimes they might decide that they need money for their city hall or for other projects, and it's hard for them to actually access the money. And sometimes there is money that just can't be used, and it goes back into the consolidated fund. So we know that the small municipalities have very significant challenges financially, and they have a fairly small tax base. So I would like to know whether you feel that the restrictions that have been imposed by the government could be changed and better help the smaller municipalities.
Mister?
Thank you, Chair, and I thank my colleague, and I miss seeing his little one in the House of Commons. I can assure my colleague that the gas tax is flexible and the funds go directly to municipalities and they get to choose what is the best use of these very important, much needed dollars, and that we've actually stepped up and expedited the delivery of these dollars to municipalities last year, and we'll do so again this year. And I'll ask my wonderful deputy to comment on that. I will also say that 8 out of $10 spent on COVID response has come from the federal government. Will continue to be there for communities, for municipal leaders who are working so incredibly hard right now to make sure that they get through this with whatever it takes, as long as it takes, as you've heard the Prime Minister say. Deputy, anything you'd like to add about the formerly known the gas tax fund?
Thank you, Minister.
Yes. Regarding the gas tax fund, there are 18 different categories for infrastructure investments for municipalities that need the help.
Municipality, it's something that actually they appreciate, because if there is a larger piece of infrastructure that they'd like to invest in, what they can do is save the infrastructure money from the gas tax one year and do that larger project the following year. And so that is an area that actually gets the challenges you've mentioned. It does not return to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. It is a transfer payment to provinces and territories, who in turn flow that money to the municipality based on the agreement that we put in place with them in 2004. So it is something that is quite flexible with the 18 different categories of investment, from roads to bridges to water, sewer to broadband connectivity. There is a far wide range of opportunities that municipalities can use, and they determine the pace of investment. They determine, based on those 18 categories, what they want to invest in, and also it pays 100%. There's no need to cost share. So that's really important as well. And as the minister noted last year, normally in previous years.
I'm sorry. I appreciate the information that's been provided. And we realize that the money can be held over. The municipalities do appreciate this program, and so that isn't my question. But really, my question is about the restrictions that were imposed. Earlier, you mentioned a number of aspects, including the fact that the money went to priority projects. And now the interpretation that is being given is not that these projects are the priority, but they are the only ones that can be approved. So the money from Quebec, for example, could be used for other purposes. But now, because of the new restrictions, the money can't be used for other things like town halls and other projects. So that's created a lot of frustration in the municipalities, and I wanted to get that message across to you. I want to change the subject now and talk about.
I just wanted to clarify, we have not changed or created any restrictions with these transfers. I want to get that on the record. We have not done that.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Barcelona-Duval. We're now going to move on to Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach of the NDP, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister, to our committee. I've been listening intently, and I have a few questions I'd love for you to take a crack at answering. The first one is, as the Minister for Rural Economic Development, I wonder if you could share with us how you as Minister define rural.
Minister.
Well, I'm in a mixed rural urban riding, so I'm rural adjacent. There are some communities, like in my colleague Goody Hutchings riding, who have, in the double digit or sometimes triple digits. Each province and territory has a different definition for their rurality, but in accordance with our infrastructure agreements with them.
Does your department have a definition for rurality?
We do.
Minister.
We do. Deputy?
So
Yep.
thank you, Mr. Chair, for the Invest in Canada program. We have defined the rural and northern infrastructure stream as a maximum of 100,000 population, but in the agreement with provinces and territories, some of them have reduced that number to what makes sense for their jurisdiction. So that's how we've defined it for that particular program to hit for smaller, program for smaller municipalities, and allowing again for that particular stream as a wide range of different types of eligible programs that make sense and can be prioritized from rural municipalities.
Mr. Bachrach.
Minister, does your department prioritize ensuring equity between investment in rural communities versus urban communities? Is that one of your priorities as a department?
Minister.
Absolutely. In fact, we've worked with our partners across the country and, of course, with our rural caucus to develop a rural lens. And we applied this lens to the COVID response, and that's been really helpful. It helps us see how different measures are affecting different communities of different sizes differently. And of course, to mitigate, for example, if we see a certain program is not seeing a kind of uptake that we need to see in a smaller or rural community, that changes our approach. We applied a rural lens to the Universal Broadband Fund, and one of the outcomes was smaller communities don't have the capacity to do the grant writing that other larger communities, to your point, may have. So we've put in place a concierge service, a one-stop shop that communities can call. A really smart official, usually an engineer, will pick up that call on behalf of the federal government and help applications navigate the difficult process, connect them with engineers and project managers or others in the region who also want to get connected, so that it's a better service and a better outcome and a more efficient outcome for them.
Mr. Bachrach.
Do you track investment in rural infrastructure over time as a department?
Minister.
Yes, we do. And in fact, we will, as part of the universal broadband investment, we'll be collecting rural data through a partnership with StatsCan to see how these funds are affecting rural communities as those connections are made.
Mr. Bachrach.
On a per capita basis, would you say that rural Canada is receiving equitable infrastructure investment compared to urban Canada?
Minister?
I would say rural communities are getting more investments, particularly with Budget 2021, through our government's efforts than any other government who's come before us.
Mr. Bachrach?
Is that something that your department tracks, the ratio or the per capita investment between rural and urban Canada?
Minister?
We track every dollar invested very carefully. Deputy, perhaps you can provide more detail to our colleague.
Ms. Gillis?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do track, as the Minister said, where our investments are going. And actually, we even map them. And so you can look in a rural community, what types of investments have been made in your community. And we do know since 2015 in rural Canada, there's been about 5,500 projects worth almost $10 billion that have been invested in rural Canada at this point in time.
Mr. Bachrach?
Yeah, I guess I keep trying to get at this different ways, but essentially we don't have a single definition of what a rural community is. Yes, there's a map that shows where all the investments are, but in order to get a sense of whether there's equity on a per capita basis between rural Canada and urban Canada, there first of all has to be a single definition, and secondly, we need to track that data over time. That feels like that isn't something that really takes place. It's something I'd really recommend. My next question, the CRTC in 2019 found that 99.6% of urban Canada has access to broadband, high-speed broadband. 45.6% of rural Canada has access to broadband. Why has rural Canada fallen so far behind when it comes to access to broadband?
Minister?
That's such an important question, and it's one of the reasons why I put my name on a ballot, because I saw communities like mine with so much to give not have the right kind of voice or advocacy or investments, and that's changed. Take broadband, for example. Our government has invested more in broadband connectivity than all governments who've come before us combined, and we see the value of investing in rural communities. When they thrive, they create jobs for the rest of us and improve the quality of life for all of us. So while I can't speak to the record of governments who've come before us, our record for delivering for rural communities is strong and will continue to be there for them.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. We're now going to move on to our second round, 5 minutes apiece for the Conservatives and the Liberals, and 2.5 minutes for the Bloc and the NDP, followed by 5 minutes each by the Conservative and Liberals. We're going to start off with our first set of questions from Mrs. Soroka. Mrs. Soroka, you have the floor. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be splitting my time with Mr. Scheer. My first question, Minister, is with the spectrum auctions and how many companies have benefited from them over the years. And I'll give an example. In Alberta, Shaw has only deployed 8% of the spectrum in rural part of Alberta. And I'm just wondering if you'll actually do a use it or lose it clause when it comes to spectrum auctions.
Minister?
That's a very important question, Gerald. I'll ask Eric to answer it, as he and his team are hard at work on this as we speak.
Mr. Dagenet?
Thank you, Minister. And yes, Mr. Chair, there's an upcoming auction of 3,500 spectrum starting on June 15th, and the deployment conditions that are associated with those auction or those spectrum licenses are the most aggressive deployment conditions that we've ever put in place, and they do support essentially a use it or lose it policy. And then we will be putting in place the spectrum auction rules for the 3,800 megahertz auction, which will be taking place.
So how much time do they have to use it before they lose it?
There are different milestones that they have to meet at year 5, year 10, year 20. They're 20-year licenses, and we expect to see progress by the ISP.
Okay, so nothing will be that short time. It's yearly, even extended all the way to the 20 years then.
There are different milestones at different time frames, so they have to start investing right away to meet those milestones.
Okay, with that, I'll pass off my time to Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Scheer, floor is yours.
get the unmute button there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, you indicated that about a third of the funding in your department goes to the established telecoms. Is that correct?
Minister?
No, a third of the Connect to Innovate program, which we introduced in our last mandate to connect Canadians to high-speed internet, supported larger telcos, a third for Indigenous, and a third for smaller ISPs.
Mr.
And is it safe to say that under the Universal Broadband Fund, money is going to the large established telecoms as well?
Minister?
We are working with a diverse range of partners, and we want to make sure smaller ISPs, internet service providers, as well as medium-sized internet service providers are part of the work as we need them to be, along with the larger telcos.
Mr. Scheer?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the project list and I see quite a few entries for Bell and for TELUS. Notably, there are no projects listed in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or Quebec so far. The question I have, though, is, we have the situation in Canada where the telecoms get special privileged protection from competition. The federal government protects the large established telecoms from all kinds of normal competitive dynamics. And in return for that protection, they're supposed to give back to Canadians. Canadians pay some of the highest cell phone fees in the world, some of the highest fees for service when compared to most of our major trading partners. The telecoms are massively profitable. In fact, Bell Canada just released its Q4 results just a little while ago. They made $932 million in the last quarter. They made $2.7 billion in profit in 2020. So here we have a situation where these large telecoms are benefiting from their privileged protection from competition. And then they ask for a handout from this government. And your government is writing them checks. We've seen this kind of corporate welfare under the Canadian Infrastructure Bank just recently. We've seen this kind of corporate welfare when this government gave $12 million to Loblaws and $50 million to MasterCard. So can you tell this committee exactly how much money Bell Canada has received from the various broadband funds that your department administers?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me correct the record. We're investing across the country in every province and territory to connect folks to high-speed internet. Just a few weeks ago, we announced a partnership with the government of Quebec worth, a combined total of more than $800 million to connect everybody, the remaining 150,000 residents without high-speed internet to this essential service. So I'm not sure what resource you're using,
your own government's
Mr.
website.
Scheer, which particular site, because what you're reading is inaccurate. I'm happy to provide you with accurate.
ic.gc.ca.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, you have like 10 seconds. If you want to make a point, go ahead.
Yeah. Just very quickly, Minister, how much money have you given Bell Canada through the various funds that your department administers?
Eric, is this something that you can provide accurate info to Mr. Scheer on?
Mr. Dagenet?
Yes, thank you, Minister. Not something I can provide accurate information at the moment, but it's something that we can provide Mr. Scheer with later.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Scheer, Mr. Soroka, and Minister Monsef. We're now going to move on to the Liberals. Ms. Jacek, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for giving us an overview of our government's ongoing commitment in terms of broadband connectivity. You've been talking about billions of dollars and tens of thousands of projects, but I'd like to just bring it right down to the practical level, to the community level. And so one of the most common concerns I hear from my constituents on connectivity is the issue as under connectivity, in which households have a very slow internet connection that often can't support programs such as Zoom, which of course we all need to work and connect with loved ones remotely. So people are frustrated when they don't have internet services, but their neighbors, say 100 meters away, do. So could you explain, Minister, how our government is addressing this issue?
Minister?
Thank you, Doctor, and for your very important work in these difficult times for your communities. Canadians have every right to be frustrated. In the best of times, life is hard without a decent internet connection, and COVID has just added to so many frustrations because, to your point, Everything's gone digital. For those who are a stone's throw away from a neighbor who's getting perfectly fine internet access and they can't catch a break, or maybe they have too many breaks in their internet connections, we've heard them. And what the Universal Broadband Fund is offering applicants is not only will we invest in the backbone infrastructure, but we will go that extra mile, that last mile of connectivity needed to connect those households with less than stellar connections and sometimes not a decent connection. This last mile investment, along with investments in cell and ongoing backbone infrastructure investment, will ensure that everybody has access to this essential service. The rapid response stream of the Universal Broadband Fund, which I referred to earlier, provides those very communities a bit of extra support this fiscal year. If there are ways to connect them through fiber, for example, those funds are being deployed as we speak. And certainly, we're not going to stop until everybody has this access. So absolutely hear those frustrations. They're real. They're all around me here in my community too. But we're determined to make those connections as quickly as possible.
Ms. Jessic?
We've also heard from a number of witnesses during the course of the study that small rural communities may lack the capacity to apply for government funding. Applications take time, sometimes, especially within the context of the pandemic. Some municipalities are just relying on a couple of hardworking staff members. So, what has our government done to ensure that small communities and, on the other side, small ISPs have the support to apply to a program like the Universal Broadband Fund?
Minister?
Thank you, Doctor. First, we brought back the Rural Economic Development Secretariat, and Alison O'Leary, our wonderful ADM, is here along with Kelly Gillis. This is a one-stop shop within the federal government to renew those relationships and connections that were lost when the previous government made the decision to get rid of the Secretariat. That's an important connection to rural communities. Second, we recognize that some 60% of municipalities have fewer than 5 staff members supporting mayors and council and everything else in addition to grant writing. And that was before COVID. So as I said, the broadband fund we put forward includes a Pathfinder service. It's a phone number as well as an email address that folks can reach out to and keep coming back to. And that hand-holding that we've been doing is working. We're seeing increases in applications directly correlated with those who called and reached out to us and the strength of applications received from those smaller communities. In addition, across government, we're applying a rural lens. So as we develop programs and policies, we take into account ways to make them more accessible to rural communities. We're collecting data so that rural communities and Canadians know that they're being counted with both the Universal Broadband Fund and the work that I'm doing with women and gender equality. We've streamlined applications so that it's easier and more accessible and more inclusive for all applicants to take advantage of federal funds, including those in rural communities. And certainly, I look forward to any recommendations that come from this committee to make sure that we make our processes, programs, and policies even more inclusive to rural and smaller communities.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Ms. Jasic. We're now going to move on to the block. Mr. Braceau-Duval, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, you have assured us that the criteria for the gas tax fund, you have changed the name, but I can't remember what that new name is because I've called it the gas tax fund for so long. So you said that there are no restrictions, and certainly I believe you. That's quite possible. But the municipalities know what they're about. And when I talk to municipal leaders, the first thing they tell me is that they can't get access to the funding for projects like they used to under the gas tax fund. So that's what I'm hearing from the Federation of Rural Municipalities, as well as the Canadian Rural Municipalities Association. So could it be that the criteria haven't changed, but the way that they have been interpreted and applied may have? If you are saying that nothing has changed, why are people not able to access the money?
Great follow-up, and certainly I hear from those municipal leaders as well. We haven't changed our criteria for this important program. The province of Quebec may have, but we have not. Deputy, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oui, dans la province du Québec, ils ont
In Quebec, they do have a program, and before it was different, and there was never eligibility for our program, and so they have now aligned their criteria with ours.
Mr. Brassard-Duval, go ahead.
Thank you. So what I would like to know is whether there has been any pressure, any discussions with the federal government to work with Quebec and get it to align its criteria.
Minister?
I believe the deputy just answered that question, but if you'd like to reiterate, Kelly, please go ahead.
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you, Chair. D'abord, oui, il y a des
Yes, there are discussions with the province of Quebec on this program and on all programs. So they decided to change their program to align it better with ours. So if we need to look at the eligibility, we certainly can do that.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Brassard-Duval. We're now going to move on to Mr. Bachrach for 2.5 minutes. Taylor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, Operation High Speed in Quebec is spending about $1 billion, over 800 million in government funds to serve about 150,000 households. And we've tried to do the math a couple different ways, but it seems like to get broadband to the 1.8 million Canadians that lack access, which was the last estimate by the CRTC, it's going to take significantly more than the 2.75 billion in the Universal Broadband Fund. Does your department have an estimate of what kind of federal investment is going to be required to meet the 2026 target?
Minister?
Very good question. Half of that $800+ million investment you referred to in Quebec has come from the federal government, and different provinces and territories will have different needs and different costs, different construction seasons. Certainly, we've invested more than $6 billion already in high-speed internet connectivity, with another $1 billion for budget 2021. We're rolling out that program as we speak, and I think the partnership with the Infrastructure Bank is also going to be interesting. We're seeing more and more internet service providers take that route as well.
Minister, I didn't quite phrase it properly. I'm just wondering if your department has an estimate of what federal investment is going to be required to meet the 2026 target.
We do.
Minister?
We do.
Okay.
Eric, please go ahead.
Mr. Dagenet?
Yes. Hi. So, Mr. Chair, the 98% objective that we want to reach in 2026, with the $2.75 billion that is in the Universal Broadband Fund, as well as the $2 billion that is with within the Canada Infrastructure Bank, the $750 million from the CRTC, as well as the billions of dollars that we will be leveraging from the provinces and the private sector, we think we can meet the target of 98% by 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Dagenet. Mr. Bachrach, you have about 20 seconds.
Okay, so about $5.5 billion in federal investment should get us to the 2026 target of 98%. I'm wondering, Minister, or to the department officials, what the 98% is based on. How did your department come up with 98%? And who are the 2% that aren't going to be served by 2026?
Minister?
like in the low Earth orbit satellite discussions that I'm sure you've been a part of and hearing will be the solution, we think, for that remaining 2% of Canadians who live in the most remote, the most hard to reach communities across the country. We've developed this in line with the maps we have, which we update regularly, that tell us who's connected to high-speed internet and who's not. And of course, we're keeping a very close eye on it through additional data that we're going to be collecting through our partnerships with StatsCan.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. We're now going to move on to the last part of our second round. I believe Mr. Scheer has taken Ms. Kusi's spot. For 5 minutes, Mr. Scheer for the Conservative Party. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Sorry, so Minister, we're talking about the amount of money established to the large telecoms, and you had asked your officials, they said they wouldn't be able to provide a response. Can you commit to this committee that you would break down how much each of the large established, Bell, TELUS, Rogers, has received from the various projects, the various envelopes that you administer?
Minister.
Mr. Chair, I can follow up with this committee on the breakdown of the funds with different partners and different internet service providers. Happy to.
Okay, thank you. And
thank you. And Mr. Scheer, if you can just, or Minister Monsef, if you can just send that to the clerk, and we'll make sure Mr. Scheer gets a copy of it. Mr. Scheer, go ahead.
Sure. And just for clarification, because I know we're coming close to the end of the time that that I had, you had asked which website I was looking at. I am looking at the Selected Universal Broadband Fund projects. So I don't know if this is yet to be updated, but more, this is one particular fund. I recognize that, but so far it's only showing projects in Alberta, British Columbia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, Northwest Territories, Nova Scotia, and Ontario. So there do seem to be a few provinces who have not yet had projects announced. So that's just more by way of clarification.
Can I
Minister?
Sure.
add some context to that, Mr. Scheer? That project tracker we updated quarterly, and we just had its first quarterly update. What you see on that site so far are the rapid response approvals that we've kind of rolled out. The core Universal Broadband Fund, which is the majority of the fund, has yet to go up on that website because we're still going through those bigger applications and having conversations with provinces about how they want to move forward with their broadband needs. So it will be updated. The site you're looking at doesn't give the full picture, only the rapid response projects that have recently been approved.
Here.
Appreciate that clarification. Just on a point of order, Mr. Chair, procedurally, I was hoping that we could move to resume the debate of the motion that Ms. Kusi had proposed last meeting. I'm more familiar with my House procedure than I am with committee procedure, so I would like to use my time here, having the floor right now, to resume the debate on the motion that Ms. Kusi had proposed last week.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. There's no debate on the resumption of that debate to move forward. So therefore, I am going to go straight to a vote. Mr. Clerk, if you want to call the vote, please.
Yeah, okay. So and again, this is just to clarify, this is a vote to resume debate on the motion that had been adjourned the other day, or we ran out of time the other day. So, Mr. Fillmore.
In favor.
Monsieur El Khoury.
En faveur.
Ms. Jacek.
In favor.
Ms. Hutchings.
In favor.
Monsieur Iacono.
Pour.
Mr. Scheer.
In favor.
Ms. Kusi.
In favor.
Mr. Shipley.
In favor.
Mr. Soroka.
In favor.
Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Pour.
And Mr. Backrack.
In favor.
It's 11 yeas, 0 nays.
Wonderful. Unanimous. I'm very impressed. Great job.
Bringing people together.
Bringing people together. Sunny ways are back. With that, Mr. Clerk, can you do us all a favor? And just so that we have clarity, can you read out the motion, please?
Mr. Chair, just before we get to that, if I could, just on a point of order,
Go ahead, Mr. Fillmore.
could we release the minister at this time?
Absolutely, absolutely. Minister Monsef, I'll take this opportunity to thank you for your time today. Unfortunately, one speaker didn't get to you, which was Ms. Hutchings. So she dropped off the bottom end. She was the next and last speaker before you were going to depart. But I do want to express on behalf of the members of the committee our sincere appreciation for attending today. We thought it was a good back and forth, great questions, great answers, and once again, I thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair. Goody's the best rural lens you'll ever find, so I think we all missed out. Thank you, colleagues. Be safe.
Thank you, Minister. With that, Clerk, go ahead.
Sure. Let's begin here. That, pursuant to Standing Order 108-1A, an order of this committee, do issue for a copy of all relevant documents relating to the agreement signed with ITC Holdings regarding the Lake Erie Connector, including, but not limited to, the agreement itself, all correspondence between ITC Holdings and the CIB, any appendices, terms of a repayment schedule, the bank's evaluation of the project, and any other relevant documents in an unredacted form within 20 days of the adoption of this order.
Thank you, Minister. Questions, comments? I see Mr. Fillmore, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And you know, I'll just start by saying it's really unfortunate. It's a fairly plain to me, and I think to any impartial observer what this motion is really about, and it's to foment a lack of confidence in the Canada Infrastructure Bank, just at the very moment when Canadians need it most, need to have investment in their communities the most. And I think I spoke from my heart at the last meeting about my disappointment that we find ourselves in this position. We're all sent here to represent our communities and to do the best thing that we can for them, and that the reason that we have been all sent here is being sacrificed in favor of I think what are some less than admirable political point scoring. So I want to resume a part of the discussion that we did get into at the last meeting, and that is about the length of time in Ms. Kuzi's motion. I mean, this is this could run into thousands and thousands of pages of documents to be produced, and to do this in just 20 days. Now, before earlier, we had an amendment to increase it to 60. That failed. I think Mr. Bacharach attempted to stretch that to 30 days. That failed. I hope that the opposition will at least agree to amend the deadline. I would like to meet somewhere in the middle, but agree to amend the deadline to provide the Infrastructure Bank with 45 days. So with that goal, I'd like to read a proposed amendment to the motion if I could. And it is as follows: that pursuant to Standing Order 108-1A, an order of this committee do issue for a copy of all relevant documents relating to the agreement signed with ITC Holdings regarding the Lake Erie Connector, including but not limited to the agreement itself, all correspondence between ITC Holdings and the CIB, any appendices, terms of a repayment schedule, the bank's evaluation of the project, and any other relevant documents in an unredacted form within 45 days of the adoption of this order. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. So we do have an amendment. For those members with their hands up, I'll ask if your questions are pertaining to the amendment. No, I see Mr. Scheer's hand went down. Mr. Alcuri, hold on, Mr. Bacharach. Yeah. Mr. Alcuri, was your question to the amendment or to the main motion?
To the amendment with some.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Jacek, I'm sure that yours was to the amendment as well. So Mr. Alcura, I'm going to come up to you next. Mr. Bachrach, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm just, because the original motion is fairly lengthy and has a lot of different clauses, and Mr. Fillmore's amendment, as I understand it, is a bit of a rewording of the original motion. I'm just wondering, in simple terms, essentially, it reflects the spirit of Mr. Scheer's motion with the timeline extended to 45 days. Is that?
I believe
maybe
so,
Mr. Fillmore can just describe what he's trying to do here.
Mr. Fillmore, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the question of clarification from Mr. Bachrach. It is intended to reflect the exact intention. Actually, it was Ms. Kuzi's motion, not Mr. Scheer's. However, amending the timeline to 45 days so that we can be fair about this and the demands that we're placing on the CIB in terms of providing an intense amount of documentation and also, by the way, translated documentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore.
Mr. Chair, while I have the floor, could I just respond, speaking to the motion or the amendment now that I understand it?
Yeah, you can get, Mr. Bachrach, you can get in the queue. We do have members here. Nice try, though. We're going to go to Mr. Alcuri, then I have Ms. Jasek, Mr. Scheer, and then Mr. Bachrach. If your hand goes up, there it is. I'll get you in the queue. Mr. Alcuri, you get the floor.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Chairman, not only is this motion coming from the opposition, but the committee and the parties need to respect our official languages and those rights in Canada. All documents have to be provided in both languages, in English and in French. I can remember that when we debated this before, there was some confusion. And there was the possibility that the documents would come in English and have to be translated by the staff. And that is unreasonable given the workload. Our staff doesn't have the time to do that. We don't really know the volume of documents, the number of pages that we are asking for, and how much time it might take to translate the documents and thereby respect the official languages, principles, and policies. In my opinion, 45 days may not be enough, so I would like to suggest we go to 60 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alcuri. We're now going to move on to Ms. Jasek. Ms. Jasek, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, just speaking to the motion as a whole, obviously I believe that Mr. Fillmore's amendment is giving a far more appropriate length of time in terms of production of any documents. But I am still extremely disturbed about the whole idea of this motion. It just seems to be something that will interfere with the workings of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, has the potential for disrupting a deal that is good for Ontario, as we've heard from officials from the government of Ontario. It seems to have all sorts of benefits potentially for ratepayers, and it is essentially something that should not be jeopardized in any way. And so I'm extremely disturbed that this motion has been put forward. And the very least that we could do, as Mr. El-Khoury has said, the translation of these documents, there are no doubt thousands and thousands of documents. It just seems like an incredibly onerous exercise with a goal that could jeopardize what seems to me to be an excellent opportunity in completing this particular initiative of the Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you, Ms. Jasek. Mr. Scheer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I know we heard some of these arguments in the last meeting, and it's not going to surprise members that I'm not swayed by Liberal members who are advocating for secrecy around this deal. The only shareholder in the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is the Canadian government. It's the Canadian taxpayer. This is the government is right to say this is the first of its kind because the Canadian Infrastructure Bank has so far been unable to complete a single project. And as the Parliamentary Budget Officer has told us, that the projects that it has announced so far do not include private sector money. Now here we have a situation where the bank is subsidizing a project that will that will primarily benefit a private company that is owned by another company, Fortis Inc., which made $9 billion in revenue and paid out over $800 million to its shareholders. I don't need to repeat the staggering financial position that Fortis Inc. is in. It's in a very, very positive position in terms of cash flow, in terms of revenue, in terms of bragging about increasing its dividend every year. And it decided not to put any extra money into this proposal. Ms. Jacek talked about how this project is going to be so good for Ontario. The Ontario government hasn't put any money into this project. So, if the Ontario government has decided not to put its skin in the game, what does that tell us about the project? And the problem here we have is we don't know a lot of details about it. So I think it's incumbent upon this committee to have that detail. Now, this amendment is about the timeline. And I'm looking at the calendar, and I think 45 days puts us awfully close to the end of the parliamentary session. And so I think it's very important that this committee have this data before the House rises, before the government can get out of Dodge, so to speak. If there are things that come back out of this deal that opposition parties or even government backbenchers decide they'd like to know more about, we lose so many parliamentary tools at our disposal. So I'm willing to meet the government. I think Mr. Baccarat had an idea last week of 30 days. That is eminently possible. We all know. I mean, I know the government's trying to talk about how much work this will be for translators and how much documentation could be provided. We've all been at committee or heard about other work done by committees where they have had much tighter timelines on much bigger projects. And the House of Commons translation staff is excellent. It has very quick turnaround times. We're not talking about digging back into the archives. This is not a cold case file exercise where we've got to, find the keys to the basement and go downstairs with the flashlight and, dust off the microfiche machines. This is a current project. All of this information would be on deposit at the CIB. They've just gone through whatever work they have done to approve this project. So, I really don't. I think this is a complete red herring in terms of the need for the timeline. And I think 30 days is eminently reasonable. It does give the bank more time. And as I said last meeting, if the Infrastructure Bank comes back to this committee with a compelling reason why it hasn't been able to fulfill this order, or if the translation staff of the House of Commons tells this committee that there's some impediment to meeting that deadline, then this committee can evaluate that. But I would like to stick to the 30-day deadline so that we can ensure that we get this information back before the House rises.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Backrack?
Well, I was going to make many of the same points, and perhaps in the interest of time, in the interest of getting to the vote on the amendment, I will just say we have no idea how many documents there are. So I think suggesting that it's going to take a lot of time because there are a lot of documents, I'm not sure what that would be based on. And if the department comes back and needs more time because they're wading through thousands and thousands of documents, I think the committee would be happy to consider their concerns in that regard. But like Mr. Scheer said, I think the timeline seems reasonable based on my short experience here. And I think we're obviously not of one mind, and that we've heard the different perspectives around the table. My preference would be that we move to a vote on the amendment and try to get back to our meeting and hearing from the witnesses we had scheduled.
Thank you, Mr. Backrack. Mr. Fillmore?
Well, thanks, Chair. we're doing our best here. I mean, we climbed down from our first attempted amendment last week of 60 days. 20 days is just patently unreasonable, and I don't think I've ever seen a document order of 20 days in my 6 years in this place. Um, but really, what we're talking about, we're fiddling at the margins here, I would say, because what's really at stake here is the motion itself. The motion itself is asking the infrastructure bank to break the law. It's putting officials at the bank in the position of asking them to break the law, to break their own governing statutes. It's a thing that we should not be doing as a committee. I think it's going to reflect poorly at the end of the day on the way that we are perceived and our ability to understand and execute our jobs in a responsible way at this committee. And it's putting all of the staff, both at the CIB and at the committee staff, in an extremely unfair and awkward position. It's frankly, the motion is an embarrassment, and it should be an embarrassment for all of us. That's what really is at stake here. Now we've tried to come down from 60 days to 45 to try to find an incremental way forward through the thicket of this motion. But please, you must try to meet us somewhere on this path through the thicket. I understand Mr. Bachrach is ready for a vote. Mr. Scheer is ready for a vote. I see that Mr. Barcelou-Duval has his hand up. I should certainly love to hear his opinion on this before we proceed to a vote. I see Mr. Iacono has his hand up. I think we just sort of have to have an opportunity to hear a few more perspectives, and I hope some common sense on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I'm going to move on to Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say that I have heard the comments of the various members of the committee, and I thought it was interesting to have these arguments about extending more time. But I think that we could maybe agree around 30 days. I think that we could have even said 3 days, because if it's impossible, then we will be told, and we will be told what a reasonable time is. So it doesn't matter how much time we say, we may be told what is possible, what is not possible, and get the documents that we need when they can be provided. But my impression is really that the problem, and this is what I have understood from Mr. Fillmore, is that regardless of the timeline, this is a problem for him. So why are we really discussing a certain number of days? Why don't we face the fact that it is the motion that is unpalatable and not the number of days? So I think that we should just go ahead and vote, Mr. Chairman, so that we can get to the real issues, and we are just going round and round about the timeline.
Thank you, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Mr. Iacono.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start off with saying that this feels like a fishing expedition, and we have no idea of what we're fishing for and for what reasons. We're just putting on this motion to go get documents. Great. But I have a question. Who's going to pay for this? Mr. Scheer, are you going to be paying for this translation of all these documents? Is you or your party going to pay for all this translation and for having people work excess hours and the limited days that you want these documents to be provided to you? Or are you going to just throw this on taxpayers? I'd rather use money in a more productive way than to just go out on a fishing expedition requesting documents, having no valid reason to why we're requesting all these documents. Then they have to be translated. And you seem to forget that there's a cost. Aren't you concerned about taxpayers and the cost of all this that's going to have on taxpayers, on Canadians. You're just concerned to going on a fishing expedition and forgetting that somebody's got to pay for this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Iacono. I have some hands up here now. Are there anybody that have their hands up that just haven't taken their hands down? Or are you wanting to speak again? Mr. Backrack, Mr. Brussel-Duval, Mr. Scheer, you all want to speak again, I'm assuming. Okay, good.
Well,
Okay.
I'd rather go to the vote, Mr. Chair, but if people are going to keep talking, then, you know.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to Mr. Backrack. Go ahead. You're on mute, Taylor.
It's probably for the better, Mr. Chair. It seems like we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole, like to suggest that the cost of having the CIB officials provide the documents is the primary driving concern here is just, it's not reasonable. And, you know, looking at the Liberal obstruction of other committees and the cost that that has caused for the taxpayers of Canada, I think we would most happily tally up those costs for comparison. To Mr. Fillmore's assertion that we're asking the CIB officials to do something that is illegal, I think that's patently untrue. And the law clerk himself has written that, quote, "There can be no doubt that, as a matter of law, the power of a House committee to order the production of documents prevails over the seemingly contrary provisions of a statute, including the Privacy Act." So we're actually asking them to follow the law, and that law requires them to produce documents if the committee so orders. So I think this is clearly a reasonable motion, and there seems to be some appetite for compromise on the timeline, and I would certainly be happy to support something along the lines of 30 days. As soon as we go to 45 days, we're not going to see those documents before the end of the session. So I think it really, it goes against the purpose of trying to get these answers, which the Canadian public deserves. We've seen these damning reports from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and I think very much the Canadian public deserves to know how these deals are structured and what value the taxpayers are getting. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair, but I'm very eager to get to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Backrack. And before I go to Mr. Scheer, I do want to ask members of the committee if you mind if I excuse the witnesses. Is that fine? Okay.
Unless
good.
they find this entertaining, then that would make sense.
Okay, so Mr. Clerk, if you want to excuse the witnesses, please. I'm going to go to Mr. Scheer now. Mr. Scheer, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And like Mr. Backrack, I will keep my remarks brief because I am anxious to get to the vote on this. I have never heard such ridiculous argument than I just did from Mr. Iacono. I mean, stop the presses, everyone. The first time, remember, the Liberal government is concerned about efficient use of taxpayers' dollars. I mean, by that logic, we'd save a lot of money on translation if we didn't even allow Parliament to hold the government to account. But of course, we've seen this government try to do that. The first thing this government did during the pandemic was try to write itself unprecedented power, sidelining the role of the opposition. And we saw why when we saw the various scandals that came out through the weak contracts and things like that. So, this is just ridiculous. The need for Parliament to provide oversight on government departments and agencies is essential. That is the core function of this Parliament. We come together to provide the accountability on spending the dollars that are entrusted to us. That is the very essence of the House of Commons, dating back for over almost 1,000 years of parliamentary tradition now. We've seen this bank waste so much money already. It lost over $500 million last year and hasn't completed a single project. So this argument about the cost of translation is such a red herring. And congratulations, Mr. Iacono, you got me to bite on it. I just couldn't let it go. What an insult to every parliamentarian, everyone who shows up to fight for our constituents, to ensure that their tax dollars are treated with respect and only spent in their interest. That's what this motion is about. If there's nothing to see here, if everything is fine, this committee will come to that conclusion. But it's essential that we provide that kind of oversight. So with that, I won't engage again on this debate, Mr. Chair. I think, like Mr. Baccarat, we may as well come to a vote on the timeline here, and then we can resume debate on the main motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Fillmore.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to thank Mr. Barcelou-Duval's for his comments. I think that the timeline we maybe we're seeing a little movement on that. But before I come back to the timeline and maybe a vote, I want to just perhaps raise something in the motion that Mr. Barcelou-Duval would be concerned about, and that is the requirement to have documents produced in 2 official languages. Now, this committee and the opposition parties have placed a lot of emphasis on ensuring that all parts of the federal government are respecting the official languages obligations. In fact, just last week, the Conservative Party raised this issue during question period. The Conservative member for Richmond Athabasca last Thursday raised a complaint about committee documents in English only. And this is directly tied to 20 days, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. Our government agrees that we should absolutely be respecting our official languages obligations. There's been some confusion during this debate, I think, about how this motion could possibly respect those obligations. There has been a suggestion that the CIB could be allowed to provide the documents in English only, and then the committee staff would translate them. My colleagues, given the breadth of this sprawling motion, we're talking about hundreds, in fact, probably thousands of pages of documents. It would be extremely unfair and patently unreasonable to place this burden on our committee staff to provide the translation. It should be the CIB's responsibility to respond to the committee's request with the documents in both official languages, and our responsibility as a committee to give them enough time in that request. I would also, again, remind us of the Conservative Party's comments last week, specifically criticizing the fact that the committees must provide documents in both official languages and not in English only, as has happened on several occasions. So there might be an amendment out there around making sure that the documents come in both official languages, but the need for both official languages is tied to the timeline as well. So I would like to come back to the point of the timeline, and I would like to say that the government is willing to try perhaps 40 days. We might find some traction on this. I hope that you can get the message. We are trying to find a path forward, as I said, that is fair to the people that support us on this committee so professionally and who work so hard, and that is fair to the CIB officials, and that is just respectful of fair and reasonable process. So I'm happy to move to a vote on the motion, and should it fail, I'll immediately try again with an amendment to try 40 days. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. And just to be clear, regardless of the intent with respect to translation, obviously we would need translation, but regardless of where you would think they would go, it all goes to the Translation Bureau. So essentially, that's where the documents will go to get translated to the Translation Bureau. With that, I did have Ms. Jacek, her hand went down. So I will now go to Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to come back to what was said by Mr. Iacono, because I was extremely surprised, scandalized, in fact, to find out why they did not want to support the motion, the fact that it was going to cost too much to translate the documents. I would have expected something different from a colleague from Quebec. So this is an objection that I can't accept. I find very surprising because I'm not I think we're not talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. We're talking about a few people who will be working on translating these documents. It's also interesting to see my colleagues around the table assuming that these documents would be in English. I think that's more evidence to me that there is an assumption that the documents are all in English, and is it not possible that there would be documents in French that would have to be translated into English? So perhaps my colleague would like to apologize for his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parcel-Duval. I am now going to, Mr. Backrack, you have your hand up. I'm assuming that your hand is.
Mr. Chair, it seems like the compromise is 30 days. If Mr. Fillmore is suggesting 45 days and the original motion has 20 days, by my math, the midpoint is closer to 30. So
Okay.
I just think we're going to end up there eventually anyway, and I would love to find some way to short circuit it. So if this amendment fails, I would love to make an amendment changing the timeline to 30 days.
Thank you, Mr. Backrack. Mr. Iacona?
Je voudrais un peu corriger le tir.
I want to just correct the record here. I think that our colleague Xavier has perhaps misunderstood my intention. What is scandalous is to request so many documents for a fishing expedition. You know, and I know I am a member from Quebec, and I speak French very well. I am proud to be a Quebecer, and I certainly agree 100% that all documents that we receive have to be translated into both languages because Canada is a bilingual language country. So I certainly am not objecting to having the documents translated, but I am saying this is a fishing expedition, and we should look at what is needed and not just go on a wild goose chase after so many documents. So it has nothing to do with objecting to the translation taking place.
Thank you, Mr. Iacono, and thank you all. I am now going to ask the clerk to call the vote. Mr. Clerk, go ahead.
All right, so this is a vote on the amendment.
Correct.
Mr. Fillmore.
En faveur.
All right, and Mr. El-Khoury.
Pour.
Ms. Jacek.
In favor?
Mr. Iacono.
Pour.
Mr. Scheer.
Opposed.
Ms. Cusi.
Against.
Mr. Shipley.
Opposed.
Mr. Soroka.
Opposed.
Mr. Parcel-Duval.
Contre.
Mr. Backrack.
Opposed.
And I just want to double check. Mr. Rogers, did I clarify? Did I call your name there?
No, you didn't.
Yeah. Mr.
I
Rogers.
vote in favor. In favor.
So we have 5 yeas, 6 nays.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and thank you, Mr. Fillmore. The amendment has lost, so we're back to the main motion again. And I see some hands up. Mr. Iacona, is your hand up from last time, or is it a new?
Sorry, I forgot to put it down.
Thank you. Mr. Backrack, I'm assuming you're the same.
I was going to make an alternative amendment.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
In the spirit of compromise, I would amend the timeline to 30 days.
Thank you, Mr. Backrack. Questions to that? Mr. Scheer, you have your hand up to the amendment, I assume. Go ahead.
No, I was going to speak to the main motion. I don't have anything to say to this amendment.
Thank you. Any questions or comments to the amendment by Mr. Backrack? With none, Mr. Clerk, if you want to call the vote, please.
Mr. Fillmore,
Contre.
Mr. El Khoury,
Contre.
Ms. Jacek,
Against.
Mr. Rogers,
Against.
Mr. Iacono,
Contre.
Mr. Scheer,
In favor.
Ms. Kusi,
In favor.
Mr. Shipley,
In favor.
Mr. Soroka,
In favor.
Mr. Barcelou Duval,
Pour.
Mr. Bachrach.
In favor.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. We're now going to move on to questions to the main motion as amended. I have first up, oh geez, you guys both went up at the same time. Flip a coin, guys. Mr. Fillmore, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I earnestly believe I did have my hand up first there, but thank you for the coin toss. Okay, so look, one of the things that that my colleagues and I have noted as a reason we don't support this motion is the impact that it would have on the Canada Infrastructure Bank's ability to function in the infrastructure investment world. And we've heard Ms. Jacek, Dr. Jacek talk about this as well, and others. If infrastructure project partners think that their company would be dragged through the mud in this way, then for cheap partisan gain, they may think twice about participating in investments with the CIB. And it pains me to believe that that is really the intention of this motion, that it is to shake confidence, to push people away, to try to make the Liberal government therefore look bad by chilling investment through the Canada Infrastructure Bank, by creating an environment in which partners do not want to participate because of such an unreasonable airing of proprietary information. Now, I know the opposition would be perfectly happy with that. It's clearly what the motion is intended to do. We know that the Conservatives want to get rid of the Canada Infrastructure Bank altogether, but we know the Canadian citizens would be the ones that lose out in that scenario. They'd lose out because they'd wind up with fewer critical infrastructure projects being built in our country, less economic growth, fewer jobs, and a less green economy than we're trying very hard to create. Now, I know that one of our colleagues will always complain when we remind him of what he said and what he campaigned on less than 2 years ago. But I think it's important to this debate because it makes clear the motivation behind this motion and what this motion is actually trying to accomplish, which is to sabotage the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So let's recall what my honorable colleague put in his Conservative Party election platform in 2019. He promised billions and billions of dollars in delays and cuts to infrastructure spending. And I know he will usually chime in to say that's a lie, but let's just take a moment to listen to what some journalists said when he finally got around to releasing the Conservative platform back in 2019. The National Post headline was, "Delayed infrastructure funds are key to Conservatives' balanced budget plan." And the National Post went on to say that the Conservative platform was, quote, "delaying billions of dollars worth of federal infrastructure investments," close quote. The Globe and Mail said the biggest spending cut proposed by the Conservatives is an $18 billion reduction in infrastructure spending over 5 years. The Globe also noted disappointment from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, who said the FCM decried the infrastructure cuts, saying in a statement that local governments across the country have an urgent need for increased investment. The Conservative platform promises, quote, appear to move in the opposite direction, said then FCM President Bill Karsten, a tremendous public servant from my own riding of Halifax. The criticism of these promised delays and cuts to infrastructure was widespread at the time, and I think we can all remember it very clearly, and rightly so. And with this motion that we're debating today, we can see that nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. The Conservatives are out to delay and cut infrastructure spending. And I have to say that it saddens me to see the other opposition parties dutifully falling in line behind the Conservatives with their support of this fundamentally flawed motion. Here's some more reaction to those promised cuts. This is from Emmett McFarlane at the University of Waterloo. He said, well, this is incompetent. Infrastructure spending desperately needs to go up, not down. I would certainly agree with Mr. McFarlane, and that, of course, is the intention of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Gary Mason said in the Globe and Mail, what party releases its platform the Friday of a long weekend? Well, it's one that doesn't want too much attention focused on it, would be my guess. Hassan Youssef, president of the Canadian Labour Congress, that perhaps our friend Mr. Bacharach ears would perk up a little bit to hear what he said. He said, over and over again, Conservatives have demonstrated hostility toward Canada's workers. Today, Andrew Scheer is doubling down on that hostility and seeking a mandate to cut. With a platform loaded with job-killing service cuts, it's clear that Andrew Scheer represents an equal threat to Canadians as Stephen Harper. In Radio-Canada, Philippe Vincent Foisy et Hugo Prévost dit un gouvernement conservateur impose.
A government that is proposing to have billions of dollars in that investment in its first mandate is good.
Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Bill Carson, again, the president said on the eve of the election, cities and communities across the country have an urgent need for increased investment in infrastructure. Proposed measures in this platform, this conservative platform, appear to move in the opposite direction, with fewer infrastructure dollars available year over year to create jobs, improve roads and bridges, and maintain the local services that Canadians rely on. What, if anything, is the Canada Infrastructure Bank for than to create those local services that Canadians rely on? Andrew Coyne in the National Post on the eve of the election in 2019. If what you seek is a coherent vision of conservatism in the 21st century, you will have to look elsewhere. Alex Boutlier, another Haligonian, moved to Upper Canada, wrote in the Toronto Star, the largest cuts are in unspecified other operating expenses, $14.4 billion over 5 years. The Conservatives suggest that they can achieve that through reining in travel spending, consulting fees, and cutting down on federal office space. Marika Walsh, Globe and Mail, wrote, the second largest proposed spending cut in the platform is a plan to save $14 billion over 5 years on federal government operating expenses, which are not detailed in the platform. She also said that the party said shrinking the size of cubicle space for public servants could be one of the ways to save that money. David Aiken at Global wrote, the single biggest saving measure is putting off some infrastructure spending. That will save $18 billion over 5 years. Well, he certainly understood what the Conservatives were intent on doing. Don Martin on CTV said, now we see why this was released late on a Friday before a long weekend. Some big cuts with few specifics. Rachel Gilmore, CTV News. The Conservative plan to balance the budget includes some serious cuts, including cutting $1.5 billion a year by reviewing business subsidy programs, prioritizing infrastructure spending, which would eliminate $1.3 billion in 2021, cutting foreign aid by $1.5 billion. Emmett McFarlane again from the University of Waterloo. I've avoided the Doug Ford, Andrew Scheer comparisons because they're definitely different people. But the details coming out about the CPC fiscal plans, particularly on the cutting side, are eerily Ford-esque. Guillaume Saint-Pierre dans le Journal de Montréal en October.
In October, he said that this will not go in the right direction. Andrew Scheer is planning to reduce investments by $18 billion over 5 years. And in addition to that, there will be $14 billion reduced in operating costs.
And in the Globe and Mail. The Conservative Party says it will cut $18 billion in infrastructure spending days after Mr. Scheer criticized the Liberals for not spending enough on infrastructure. October 2019. Don Martin again on the Friday afternoon release. Just ahead of a long weekend, he said, that usually means bad news, and the Conservative blueprint for governing, which came out less than an hour ago, shows some startling ways to cut spending that had not been disclosed before. Look, I've got pages of this because pages exist of it. The Conservative Party has decided that investing in Canadian communities is not something that they are supportive of. In fact, as they pursue their philosophy of shrinking government and shrinking government spending, they're clearly attempting to do it on the backs of Canadians and on the infrastructure that Canadians require and depend upon to run their businesses, to get to school, to raise their children, to educate their children, to pipe services, to create energy, everything, all the infrastructure that our communities rely upon require and deserve federal investment, not federal cuts. And for this motion to try to camouflage that philosophical position on which is anti community investment under the guise of a fishing expedition seeking thousands and thousands of pages of proprietary business dealing information that, as I mentioned last week, we had proponents of the A to A railroad on here. I wish they'd left their cameras on because I would have liked to have seen their faces when they heard what this motion actually meant and the chilling effect that it would have on investment in major infrastructure in our country. The CIB, we have renewed the leadership. We have instituted a growth plan. We are approving projects. We've got REM in Montreal. We've got the Erie Connector. There are other examples emerging as we speak. This is what Canada is asking for. These are the projects that are going to steer us out of the economic slump that this pandemic has caused, and at the same time, create jobs, lead us into a greener economy, and create a more inclusive economy in which all Canadians can participate. This is the work. This is the work that we were all sent here to do by our constituents, by the people who hired us to come to this place. I'm going to leave it there, Mr. Chair. I look forward to hearing what some of my colleagues have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I'm going to move on to Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, you have the floor.
Well, Mr. Chair, this is what happens when Liberals are exposed to accountability and transparency. They react much like they act very vociferously when they get backed into a corner, and they fear the sunlight that was supposed to be the disinfectant has become the thing that gives them sunburns. Where to begin? Canadians would lose out if the infrastructure bank ceased operations. Lose out on what? They've completed nothing. The only two projects that this government can point to are projects that were already going to get funding, that the government just made a political decision to fund through the CIB, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer has unveiled has actually no private sector investment in them. We have here a first of its kind type of arrangement where instead of public dollars leveraging private sector money to get public infrastructure built, the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, the Canada Infrastructure Bank, has proposed a model in which private money has leveraged public funds to get private infrastructure built. That this is now a case, instead of having the private sector play a role in designing or operating or maintaining, to get a public asset, something that Canadians own, either through the municipal, provincial, or federal governments, this is now going to be an asset that is owned by a private sector company. Now, I could litigate every single point. I know Mr. Fillmore can have lots of quotes from his ideological soulmates in various institutions who support who benefit from the Liberal government and support their ideology. I could if this debate goes on before this beyond this committee's meeting, I can come at the next meeting with lots and lots of quotes from ethics experts talking about this government's scandalous decision to sole source grant contract worth almost $1 billion to their friends in the We charity. How the Prime Minister and his family personally benefited from the We organizations. How they benefited politically by having the We organizations give them a platform. I could stick to infrastructure and bring Auditor General's reports in and Parliamentary Budget Officer reports in and read back, not quotes from editorialists or columnists with their own opinion, but just cold, hard facts, just black and white numbers. The reality is, what we offered in the last election was a recognition that this government had cut infrastructure through its lapsing. In the first few years of this government's existence, it lapsed $8 billion in infrastructure spending. That was commitments to municipalities, to towns and rural municipalities, to villages, that they were going to get help in upgrading their water systems, expanding their roads, all kinds of different types of assets that would improve the lives of people in those communities. And this government lapsed that funding, effectively cut that funding by $8 billion in the first few years, and they continue to lapse that money year over year. This has been referred to as a fishing expedition. By that logic, if CRA looks at anybody's tax return, then CRA is just on a fishing expedition. We have mechanisms in our government where there is oversight provided. That does not to say that every time a committee exercises its oversight function that it always uncovers something, but it's the fact that that oversight exists that ensures proper behavior from government departments. And if this committee and other committees just decided that they would never cast a second look or have another run at the numbers or the proposals, that would be a huge detriment to the accountability and transparency that our parliament is based on. We have discovered through all kinds of studies gross examples of misexpenditures. I had an order paper question asking about infrastructure cost overruns due to delays. I believed that we would probably get some projects here or there in the infrastructure departments. I was shocked to find out how much Parks Canada, how much extra cost the taxpayer Parks Canada has caused through project delays. I wasn't expecting it to find there, but the very fact that I asked the question forced government agencies and government departments to answer the question, and now we can see the millions and millions of dollars that Parks Canada has cost taxpayers by failing to manage its own asset life. So that's what this motion is all about. Now, again, as I mentioned in the last meeting, if private sector companies don't want to have these types of measures, accountability measures imposed upon them, there are lots of lenders that will provide confidentiality and secrecy to them. I believe it's safe to say that every chartered bank in the country has all kinds of commitments to its clients about maintaining secrecy and confidentiality about their clients' operations. This is different. This is the taxpayer that's funding this. If Mr. Fillmore wants to talk about cuts that Conservatives promised in the last campaign, let's talk about the cuts to corporate welfare that we promised. Corporate welfare that this government just can't get enough about. Liberals and corporate welfare, they go hand in hand. And we've seen so many examples where hardworking Canadians who are just struggling to get by during this pandemic. I know so many people in my riding, as I'm sure every member, regardless of party, on this committee knows, people in their community who have lost everything, who have been forced to shut their doors because of the pandemic and have lost their life savings. Friends of mine have had to sell their homes to pay off the bills from their small business because they've owned restaurants that they're not allowed to open. It's heart-wrenching. It's heartbreaking. And then when you see this announcement coming on the heels of this government giving $12 billion to Loblaws for fridges, a multi-billion-dollar company, $50 million to MasterCard, a credit card company that makes its living off the backs of working Canadians who can't pay their full balances, getting $50 million in taxpayers' money. Now we have an example of a private sector company worth billions of dollars through its subsidiary gets a check for $655 million. This whole exercise is finding out why that decision was made, how the agreement is structured. That is what this is all about. Now, I did mention in our last meeting that I was sympathetic to the argument about some types of information that there would never be an expectation of disclosure on from on the part of the third party here, the ITC Holdings. And in the spirit of cooperation, inspired by Mr. Bacharach's enlightened compromise of 30 days rather than the original 20, I would propose a motion to the motion first put forward by Ms. Kuzi. And I can assure members that I have consulted with the law clerk's office today to ensure that this is worded properly and in the spirit of compromise and trying to ensure that that the motives of this are clear, that this is about accountability and understanding why this motion is necessary and the information that this committee is being asked for. I would propose the following amendment: that after the words "within 30 days of the adoption of this order," which we've just amended through Mr. Bacharach's order, so after the words "this order," that the motion would have the following amendment added to it. That the law clerk and parliamentary, sorry, I guess I'd have to amend the that whole sentence. So I would amend the following: that the documents be provided in an unredacted form to the law clerk and parliamentary counsel within 30 days of the adoption of this order. That the law clerk and parliamentary counsel redact from the documents, except for the agreement itself, its appendices or schedules, any information that constitutes a trade secret. A, any information that constitutes a trade secret. B, any information, the disclosure of which could reasonably result in material financial loss or gain to ITC or a third party or prejudice their competitive position. C, any information, the disclosure of which could reasonably interfere with contractual or other negotiations of ITC or a third party. And D, any personal private information. That the CIB, in consultation with ITC, may propose redactions to the law clerk and parliamentary counsel respecting the information that should be redacted pursuant to this order, and that the law clerk and parliamentary counsel provide the redacted documents to the committee as soon as the redactions are completed.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, would you have that handy as a document that you can send to the clerk, please?
Yeah, I can. It might take me a minute or so, but yeah,
I'll give you that minute. And in the meantime, did you folks want to take a 2-minute, 3-minute break before we move on? Just maybe a health break? That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to suspend for about 3 minutes, let everybody take a little health break, and then we'll reconvene.
Could the clerk? CIB to produce a copy of all documents relating to the agreement signed with ITC Holdings, ITC, regarding the Lake Erie Connector, including the agreement itself, any appendices or schedules, all correspondence between ITC and the CIB, terms of any repayment schedule, any CIB evaluation of the project, and any other relevant documents. That the documents be provided in an unredacted form to the law clerk and parliamentary council within 30 days of the adoption of this order. That the law clerk and parliamentary council redact from the documents, except for the agreement itself, its appendices or schedules, any information that constitutes a trade secret, be any information, the disclosure of which could reasonably result in material financial loss or gain to ITC or a third party, or prejudice their competitive position. C, any information, the disclosure of which could reasonably interfere with contractual or other negotiations of ITC or a third party. And D, any personal, private information. That the CIB, in consultation with ITC, may propose redactions to the law clerk and parliamentary council respecting the information that should be redacted pursuant to this order, and that the law clerk and parliamentary council provide the redacted documents to the committee as soon as the redactions are completed.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. And you jumped in sooner than I can say I reconvene. As a former speaker, you should know better than that.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Clerk, all is good?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I am now going to go to the floor for questions to the amendment. I have Ms. Jacek and Mr. Barso-Duval. I'm not sure if you're taking your hand down, but for any one of you, including you, Mr. Barso-Duval, any questions to the amendment, please get your hands up. Ms. Jacek, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I move that the committee do now adjourn.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Jacek. That is a dilatory motion. There's no debate. And I'll ask the clerk to call for the vote.
Mr. Fillmore,
In favor.
Monsieur El Khoury,
Ooh.
Ms. Jacek,
In favor.
Mr. Rogers,
In favor.
Monsieur Iacono,
Cool.
Mr. Scheer,
I vote no.
Ms. Kusi,
Against.
Mr. Shipley,
Against.
Mr. Soroka,
Oppose.
Monsieur Barso-Duval,
Contre.
and Mr. Bachrach. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Your boom mic is up in the air.
My apologies, Mr. Clerk. I'm opposed.
Thank you. It's 5 yeas, 6 nays.
Thank you, members. I'm now going to go back to questions to the amendment. Oh, Ms. Jacek, you have your hand back up. Ms. Jacek, go ahead. Has your hand up for the question, or is it still up from before?
It is now resuming debate, I believe.
There you go. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Scheer has made it very clear that he does not like the Canada Infrastructure Bank. He's alluded to lapsed funds. He's talking about the bank losing money, which in both cases I think is an inaccurate description of how the bank in fact functions. But I want to actually address particularly why this particular project, the Lake Erie Connector Clean Power Project, is so important and why it is particularly fitting that the Canada Infrastructure Bank be involved in this project. Clean power projects are often delayed or not developed because of financing challenges and gaps in the capital structure. So to help deliver clean power projects, the CIB will provide low-cost and long-term capital, often pegged to revenue streams that are not typically sufficient for traditional debt and equity investors. So in working with governments and project developers on delivering clean power projects, the CIB will structure these investments to increase the use of private sector capital, reduce the weighted average cost of capital, and provide certainty on long-term debt and equity returns, and transfer more construction and operations risk to the private sector. Now, of course, clean power is particularly important. And as we know, the CIB in its growth plan has particularly dedicated funds, some $2.5 billion, for clean power. And I think we all understand, at least most of us understand, that climate change is a serious problem globally, and that Canada needs to do its bit. And so clean power is a particularly appropriate area for investment by the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And because I was particularly interested in this project, certainly when I saw that Ontario's Minister of Energy, Mines, Northern Development and Indigenous Affairs, the Honourable Greg Rickford, was so enthusiastic about the project, I decided I wanted to do a little bit more reading about this particular project. So I want to make sure everyone on the committee has a full understanding of what we're talking about in this particular case. So the Canada Infrastructure Bank and ITC Investment Holdings have signed an agreement in principle to invest $1.7 billion in the Lake Erie Connector project. And under the terms of the agreement, and this is all publicly known, the CIB will invest up to $655 million, or up to 40% of the project cost. ITC is a subsidiary of Fortis Incorporated, and private sector lenders will invest up to $1.05 billion, which is the balance of the project's capital cost. And so what exactly is the Lake Erie Connector? It's a proposed 117-kilometer underwater transmission line connecting Ontario with the PJM interconnection, the largest electricity market in North America. The 1,000-megawatt high-voltage direct current connection will help lower electricity costs for customers in Ontario. I made reference to this being especially important for customers in Ontario, and improve the reliability and security of Ontario's energy grid. The Lake Erie Connector will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and be a source of low-carbon electricity in the Ontario and U.S. electricity markets. During construction, the Lake Erie Connector is expected to create 383 jobs per year and drive more than $300 million in economic activity. Over its life, the project will provide 845 permanent jobs and economic benefits by boosting Ontario's GDP by $8.8 billion. The project will also help Ontario to optimize its current infrastructure, avoid costs associated with existing production curtailments or shutdowns, and it can leverage existing generation capacity and transmission lines to support electricity demand. ITC continues its discussions with First Nations communities and is working towards meaningful participation in the near term and as the project moves forward to financial close. So another win-win in involving our Indigenous communities. The CIB anticipates financial close late in 2021, if not disrupted by this particular motion, pending final project transmission agreements with construction commencing soon after. ITC will own the transmission line and be responsible for all aspects of design, engineering, construction, operations, and maintenance. Now, this has been an ongoing discussion for many, many years because ITC actually acquired or decided to commence the Lake Erie Connector project in August 2014, and it has already received all necessary regulatory and permitting approvals, including a U.S. presidential permit and approval from the Canada Energy Regulator. So this is a very important investment, and there is a commitment to go ahead, and it is extremely important for citizens in Ontario. It has received a number of endorsements, and the CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank at the time, Aaron Corey, says this project will allow Ontario to export its clean, non-emitting power to one of the largest power markets in the world, and as a result, benefit Canadians economically while also significantly contributing to greenhouse gas emissions reductions in the PJM market. The project allows Ontario to better manage peak capacity and meet future reliability needs in a more sustainable way. And this is a true win-win for both Canada and the US, both economically and environmentally. So, as I've said many times during the debate on this particular motion, any move that might cause anxiety in terms of possible investors in this project is something that I think is harmful. And that is why I am at this point in time not convinced that this motion, even with the amendment, though of course we will be studying the amendment proposed by Mr. Scheer very carefully, it is not one that should move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Jasek. Well said, well stated. Before I move on to Mr. Fillmore, I do want to inform the committee that I've been informed that management will not have services available past 9 p.m. So there is a hard stop for 9 p.m. And that's when I'll be suspending the meeting. With that, Mr. Fillmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Jasek. The potential investment of $2.5 billion in Canadian clean energy on the way toward a $5 billion investment over the midterm. It's a remarkable opportunity. Absolutely. In fact, I'd like to get on the record the benefits of this project so that all committee members are fully aware. These are the benefits according to the project proponent that, and these are the benefits that hang in the balance really of this ill-conceived motion. So the first is, what are the real customer savings involved here? The Lake Erie connector is going to maximize efficiency. It's going to increase competition, which creates opportunity for significant customer savings. For Ontario customers, that's going to translate into some very quantifiable benefits. $100 million plus per year in net benefits, $3 billion in savings over 30 years of the project. Savings of $22 per year per residential customer, savings of $660 per customer over 30 years of the project. It enables market access, and we heard this from earlier testimony. The Lake Erie connector will enable direct access between Ontario, a significant energy market with a very different resource mix, and PJM, the largest multi-state competitive power market in the world. I believe it's 13 states and the District of Columbia. This is going to enable the buying and selling of energy capacity and renewable energy credits. Harnessing energy trading with the largest electrical market in the world will also allow Ontario to take advantage of low-cost capacity imports on an as-needed basis, find high-value export markets when the province is in surplus, all the while using transmission lines that are presently underutilized. These benefits are going to prove entirely valuable for Ontario's electricity system and help lower costs for residents and businesses, as previously stated, in the time when we need that most. Having access to the Ontario energy market will provide the PJM participants on the other side of the border with increased trading opportunities with resulting increases in market efficiencies, the ability for load-serving entities and large electricity customers to obtain energy from non-emitting wind, solar, hydro, and nuclear resources during periods of surplus generation in Ontario, with a resulting reduction in PJM's emissions profile. So as we know, GHGs don't obey political boundaries. What's good in Canada is good in the US, and if we can help to reduce emissions there, then that's another check mark in the win column for the Erie connector. It's a shovel-ready project. The Lake Erie Connector is ready to go. It has received all the necessary regulatory and permitting approvals, including a National Energy Board Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, a U.S. Department of Energy presidential permit, Pennsylvania and United States Army Corps of Engineers permits. The route is finalized. It has secured all the necessary real estate and rights of way. Positive discussions with Indigenous communities, and Ontario Ministry of Energy inclusion in the LTEP. ITC/Fortis have invested over $40 million US to permit the project. Well invested. It's a very serious, credible application. ITC Fortis are ready to invest up to $1 billion US in this Ontario infrastructure. Moving forward now with the Lake Erie Connector will ensure the infrastructure will be put in place for both markets to import and export electricity and enjoy a wide array of shared benefits. One of those is access to clean energy. The Lake Erie Connector can offer significant support to the goals laid out in the North American Climate, Clean Energy and Environmental Partnership between Canada, USA, and Mexico, including, including the continental goal to achieve 50% clean power generation by 2025. Are we really sure we want to put this in jeopardy? The Lake Erie Connector can help provide a cleaner energy mix by reducing Ontario's GHG emissions in the electricity sector by up to 2 to 3 million tons per year. It can open access to non-emitting electricity imports to Ontario from PJM during periods of potential capacity shortfalls, such as during Ontario's nuclear refurbishments. For PJM participants, load-serving entities and large electricity customers will be positioned to obtain energy from non-emitting wind, solar, hydro, and nuclear resources during periods of surplus generation in Ontario, with a resulting reduction in PJM's emissions profile. Another one of these shared benefits is economic development in both regions, south and north of the border. The Lake Erie Connector will provide system reliability and security benefits. The project is expected to increase market efficiencies and benefit local economics. When completed, the Lake Erie Connector will make tax payments which will benefit local communities and residents. Another benefit, safe technology and low environmental impact. The high voltage direct current, or HVDC, cables that are considered for this project have very little impact on their environmental surroundings. HVDC technology is proven to be safe and reliable. The solid cables are well insulated. They contain no gels or liquids. They are made from non-flammable materials. They're essentially inert. Because the cables are constant direct current, DC current, in other words, no fluctuating electromagnetic fields, are created. The HVDC converter stations that will be located on either end of the cable will utilize the latest technology, which is proven robust, flexible, and very stable. Most of the HVDC cables for the Lake Erie Connector will actually be buried under Lake Erie. The water jet installation process minimizes disturbance to the lake bed and helps to minimize the width of the trench, which is barely larger than the cables themselves and which begins to be filled in by natural forces of water movement once the cables are in place. Transmission lines buried underwater are much less susceptible to damage by inclement weather or natural disasters. In fact, if a cable is damaged, automatic protection systems stop the power flow within a fraction of a second. So colleagues, to conclude, I think it's pretty clear that the opposition is trying to derail an investment that will benefit the Ontario economy, will benefit Ontario electricity ratepayers, will benefit our environment. And I think that's very unfortunate. I think it's also very unfortunate that it comes at this time when we're seeing our largest trading partner, our next door neighbor, the longest shared border in the world, returning to the Paris Climate Agreement, establishing their own net zero emission goals. This is a time more than ever before in the history of these two countries that collaboration and cooperation on our shared efforts to address the climate emergency head on and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by any means that we can possibly come up with, including trans-border transmission opportunities, is incumbent on us to pursue, not just because it's an economic imperative that will help us to recover from a pandemic-induced recession, but because it's an environmental imperative that is going to help us to restore the environment and to make sure that we leave a habitable world for our children and grandchildren. I'd go further and say that this work toward reducing our GHGs in collaboration with the United States is a moral imperative. I mean, this is something that we must do. There are many ways that we can go about reducing GHGs in North America. Putting a price on carbon pollution is high on the list. Changing behaviors among the public to shift modes of transport from single occupant vehicles to active transportation to electrified transit is another one. To encourage our communities to grow and develop in more dense, more walkable, and less car dependent physical arrangements is another one. Encouraging young Canadians to pursue fields of study in the sciences and in the environmental sciences so that they understand the seriousness of the stewardship role that they're inheriting as they come of age and become the people that sit in the very chairs that we're sitting in now as they lead this world into what today is an uncertain future, but can be a much brighter future, a much cleaner and greener future if we allow good green infrastructure projects like the Erie Connector to proceed. And if we create the economic conditions, the business case conditions that can encourage even more proponents to come forward with similar projects, we can build a critical mass of investment in green, clean infrastructure of tomorrow that will help us all reach our GHG reduction targets, whether they're provincial targets, whether they're national targets, whether they're shared targets under the Paris Climate Accord. This is how we're going to change the world, quite frankly, and leave a habitable world for our kids and grandkids. Mr. Chair, I think I've made my point, and I'm going to leave it right there and thank my colleagues for their kind attention. And I'm sure they will have more to say as time goes on here. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Fillmore, and before I adjourn the meeting, I am going to remind members that the study on the government response to the downing of Ukraine Flight 752 witness lists should be sent to the clerk as soon as possible. The first meeting will be next Tuesday, May 11th, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Transport will be making a joint appearance on Thursday, May 13th. So members, with that said, great meeting. And with nothing else to say, no questions, and not moving on past 9 o'clock because of health and safety reasons, as well as strained resources, as I'm sure you well imagine, I will adjourn this meeting. Have a great night.